So I wanted to put something together for you that talks about some of the reasons why you would go for an MBA, as well as talking about the different types of MBAs. So over the years, I can't begin to tell you how many times I've been asked, was it worth it for you to go and get an MBA? I got an MBA relatively early, just a couple of years after I got my bachelor's degree, and I've also been teaching MBA, executive MBA courses for a really long time. So I wanted to talk about, what are some of the reasons why you would go for an MBA in the first place. So the first one would be if you genuinely need it. So if you sincerely need an MBA for your job, and a lot of jobs don't need an MBA, by the way, some do, but if you sincerely need it, whether you are in a particular industry that really does require it, or if you want to do something like what I've done for a really long time, have a second career, also, teaching. So there might be some reason for it. And if that's the case, then I think it's pretty straightforward. And you probably want to get an MBA, not super rushed, but you probably want to get it as fast as possible or as soon as possible. And I think that that would be a fair thing to say. There's a good chance that you might already be a full-time working professional, and you'll probably pick a school that is really on practical grounds. The second reason, and this is one of the most difficult for me to talk about because I want to say this the right way, you may have just gotten your undergraduate degree and you may just simply feel as though you want to, continue on with school for whatever reason. But, a lot of schools have what they call a 4+1 program. Believe me, I swear to you, I am not trying to be judgmental at all. There's a lot of people that I know. There's several people, a few in particular, where, I know you when you were doing a 4+1. There's other people that I've given a recommendation to because they're doing the, grad program after their undergrad. So please believe me, I say this with the utmost sincerity. I completely understand why people do that, and I completely understand why people would want to do that. But the issue with that is that you never have this transition between undergrad and grad. So there's a few issues that kind of come with that. One, I am firmly of the belief that, especially if you're going for an MBA, or if, let's say, if it's an MS in a business program, but especially if you're doing a business degree, you really do want a couple of years of working experience, because when you go back to your graduate school, you want to have a lot more appreciation of the subject matter that's being taught to you. Now that you have some perspective and you have some experience with it, you'll have a lot more of what I like to call aha moments in class. Aha moments are really good because, of course, with an aha moment, you're relating things that the teacher is saying to what you're either doing currently or what you recently just did, or maybe what you did at work a year ago. And so it really does add a lot more value that way. The other thing I would say, and again, I say this respectfully, there's a reason why schools do these 4+1 programs. It's unfortunately not about you. It's about them. They want to keep you for 5 years as opposed to, collecting money from you for only 4 years. And one of the issues is, now, if there's certain professors that you really like, that's great. Maybe you're going to have them again as, a grad student. Sometimes that does happen. But at the same time, aside from, not having that transition, unfortunately, I don't think you're really going to feel as though the subject matter really has changed all that much. Unfortunately, I don't really feel as though you're going to necessarily feel as though you're in grad school. You're going to probably feel as though instead of a 4-year degree, you really just kind of are going for a 5-year degree. So, not only is there no transition from that perspective that I was just talking about, but there also is something to be said about, literally it just also kind of feeling almost exactly the same. And I hate to say this to you, and I've been instructed this way at times, not always at times, but sometimes even the book for, let's say if it's Intro to Marketing or Principles of Marketing, whatever the school calls it, sometimes the book for undergrad and grad that is used is actually the same. I hate to say that. It's not that the assignments are the same per se, but you have to remember, when you're in grad school, let's say you already have a business degree as an undergrad, and when you go into grad school, you have to understand that some of those incoming grad students may not have a business degree. They may come from maybe the arts or, the humanities. So if that actually is the case, which often is, it's the job of the instructor to really kind of start from scratch, depending on the subject matter, of course. It's not as though you have to repeat all the subjects in the major that you took. Again, I'm not saying that, but some of it is going to feel like, wait a minute, how come there isn't a more sort of substantial or more significant, kind of transition into something either more complicated, more complex, and there's a good chance that that'll happen. I don't want that to happen to you, but there's a good chance that it actually might. The third reason, and to be honest with you, this is probably a little bit of a piggyback to the second reason, is what I would call the prestige element. Now, granted, 20, 30 years ago, having an MBA had more prestige to it. I'm not necessarily saying that having an MBA either does or doesn't, but it doesn't have as much prestige to it. I mean, unless you're going to, an Ivy League school, but, just talking about an MBA degree, it doesn't really have all that prestige to it. Education is more attainable these days. Again, from this perspective, I'm just saying if reason number 3, prestige, is why you're going for an MBA, to kind of say a little bit, that you have an MBA, that's probably one of the least important reasons why you'd want to go back to school in the first place. The last reason I would say is going back to get an MBA for the, quote, knowledge. So this is probably the most noble. Sometimes people get 2 master's degrees, by the way. Maybe they're an engineer, for example, and they also want an MBA. Part of it might be, to help them round out their career in the future. I've had surgeons who have been students of mine in executive MBA classes. Really the whole, aspect of, wanting the knowledge. Be careful with this. This one, of course, is noble, but you will find that, unfortunately, because in a lot of cases, I'm just always going to, tell you the truth, an MBA sort of kind of being the new bachelor's degree, the new BA, really is not going to probably be as intense as you want it to be. As someone who also has a career as an instructor, I take my role as an instructor really seriously. Sometimes I probably take it too seriously, but I always do it for you guys. There should be an intensity in a master's program. In particular, I think an undergrad program as well, but since we're talking about MBAs, in a master's program, there should be a level of intensity. And unfortunately, for a lot of reasons, some of which are very political, I'm not going to get into it here, you're not going to find that. You're not going to find full-time professors as well as most adjuncts to really kind of, be willing to take it to that level. Unfortunately, it's always the guy like me who takes it to that level, and, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. I get praised as well as criticized for it. There are going to be some courses in your MBA which are going to be wonderful, and they're going to be good challenging, but I really have to say that's probably going to be the minority. The majority of classes, unfortunately, I don't think are really going to give you that rigor that you might be looking for if really this is, one of your goals for getting an MBA. And it really should be one of your goals, even if you really kind of fall into, reason number 1 or 2. Hopefully reason number 4, the knowledge, still means something in 2021. I don't think it really means as much as it used to, and I think it's diminishing every day, but hopefully, it means some damn thing. This is your money as well as your time. So like many things in life, and I'm not trying to be philosophical here, a lot of this stuff is in your hands at the end of the day. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the different types of programs, and I just wanted to give you a summary of some of the pros and the cons as I see them. So first off, of course, you've got the full-time MBA. This makes a lot of sense if you are going to continue from undergrad and go straight into, an MBA program. Maybe you haven't started your career yet, or maybe, unfortunately, if you've, lost your job, or you're just really kind of thinking that you need a definitely, a new start. Pros to this, are that it does sort of have that sort of traditional feel to it. The courses are probably going to be, of course, some of this depends on the school, but the courses in general are probably going to be a little bit more theoretical, especially if they're being taught by professors who are full-time, PhD. Maybe, they're mainly what they do is teach during the day. Probably will be a little bit more theoretical. Some people like that, some people don't. One of the cons, unfortunately, is that, it could possibly feel like undergrad. And that's just something, you have to kind of look at that from a risk perspective. The other issue with a classic MBA is that you're not going to necessarily have students that are really going to have all that much experience. So that's another thing that you have to kind of consider, because in my opinion, one of the great values of an MBA program, and that's why I love cohort programs, by the way. A cohort program is a very specific thing, by the way. But one of the things that I love about cohort programs is that you do have the networking piece to it. So if you're a full-time MBA student, of course you can network with students, but you're networking with students that really don't have all that much experience either, just like you. So the value of the networking, can they be wonderful friendships? Sure. But the value of the networking, you kind of have to be a little bit careful with that. So then, of course, we've got the part-time MBA, which is a really great option for working professionals, whether you do, mainly evening, as well as maybe you do some Saturday classes, or, kind of a mixture of both. So, there's definitely a couple of pros to this. You've got the flexibility for sure, and you will have an older demographic. That means, not just older for the sake of older, but you'll have a demographic that does have a lot more experience, as well as, more working experience. And that can make the classroom experience a lot richer. It really can. So those are definitely, pros to it. Cons, you have to be a little bit careful, because I've had, again, lots of different grad students over the years, and so many of which I love, and some of which I've really made friendships with. So, but sometimes if you're not careful, your part-time MBA, which you thought realistically might be 3.5, maybe even 4 years, winds up being 5, 6 years, and you don't really kind of want to drag it on forever. Sometimes, I know it's in your hands, but sometimes we do get a little bit busy with our careers. It's not as though we've kind of given up on school, but if you kind of, take too many semesters off, quite frankly, then you kind of also have to question, like, am I really in school? Am I really in a part-time program? Because even though you're in a part-time program, you can't make it last forever, to be really honest with you. And you shouldn't really make it last forever. There really should be kind of, an end to this at some point. There should be some type of light at the end of the tunnel. That would be at least realistic. So you don't want to have it, drag on and on. Sometimes that can happen. Another con with the part-time MBA, if you are looking for that sense of networking, and I hope you don't think I'm, being contradictory, while the part-time MBA does have a lot more experienced students in it, it does become a lot harder to network with those students, because you're coming in from work, you're sometimes rushing into the building, literally, so are they, and then, sometimes depending on your life and what else you've got going on in your life, sometimes you're rushing out, and so are they. Even when you do projects, there always seems to be some kind of stressful time constraint, so you really just have to be mindful of that. The next one that I have a lot of opinions on is the executive MBA program. So I've taught in an EMBA program for several years. I absolutely loved it. I adored it in so many ways. As the teacher, of course, if I were to, if someone were to ask me in totality, what is the best caliber and quality of student you've ever had? Definitely EMBA, definitely, no doubt about it. However, a couple of things that are of concern here. Number one, executive MBA programs are quite expensive, and the value that you're getting is not there per se. It's not going to be as valuable as you think it's going to be. So yes, it's an all-inclusive program. There's a lot of executive MBA programs which are Saturday only. Some of them might be Sunday only. Some of them might be a blend of Friday night and Saturday, whatever it might be. It's a cohort program, so you definitely get the networking. A lot of executive MBA programs, not all, but a lot of them are done off campus, for example, in a hotel where, not only do you have more, attractive accommodations, but you also get fed twice a day, all that stuff. There's one, trip that you go on, an overseas trip, whether it's China or whether it's Brazil or whether it's Europe, whatever. So all of that's kind of, going to be part of it. But sometimes I have to say, and I say this with respect, even though we're living in a COVID world right now, and many colleges have sort of loosened their entrance requirements, one of the attractive qualities to an executive MBA program, and there have been students who have admitted this to me, and they've told me that the only reason why they're in an EMBA program as opposed to an MBA is because they were honest with me, and they frankly told me that they were intimidated by entrance exams and the GRE, GMAT, etc. So that's something that I appreciate the honesty, but you don't want to pay an extra $20,000 just to not take an entrance exam. In case you were wondering, in case you've heard, are a lot of the courses in an MBA program the exact same as an executive MBA program, meaning apples to apples? Innovation in the MBA program in a school and a course called innovation in the executive MBA course in that same school, is it going to be essentially the same? There's a really good chance that it's going to be exactly the same, and there's going to be a really good chance that it could also be the same exact instructors. I'm living proof of that, okay? Not everyone would want to admit that to you, but I'm here to help you. You definitely have a dedicated cohort. Most people, usually EMBA programs are somewhere around 24 months. I'm sure they're reduced nowadays to maybe 16 months. Generally speaking, you kind of stick with the same people. Generally speaking, there are going to be people that are going to leave for a variety of reasons, but generally speaking, you're going to stick with the same amount of people and the same people for the entire experience, which is sort of family. That networking is definitely going to be there. If you do want, of course, that overseas trip, and that is valuable to you, then definitely go for it. There are some additional benefits that I would call, maybe enhanced networking, but the other sort of fringe benefits, okay, so, you get an iPad. Well, you're not getting a free iPad. You're paying for that, and everything's sort of all-inclusive. So, just remember, you're not really getting as much as you might think. If it works for you, great. You definitely get a higher caliber of students for sure, but at the same time, let's kind of get into some of the cons. I've heard this from some of my former executive MBA students often, and they say it for the right reasons and they say it with love. So because, unfortunately, there's one thing about an EMBA that I haven't mentioned yet, and I hate to mention this, but I will. So an executive MBA used to mean something kind of specific. You had to have X amount of years before you could even be considered for an EMBA program. For the most part, unless, again, it's an Ivy League school, but aside from that, for the most part, all schools across the board have essentially done away with those requirements. They will, as long as you kind of, meet their minimums, they're happy to take your money. That's unfortunately the truth. They are more than happy. The director of the EMBA program is, really trying to be your buddy, trying to be your pal, trying to be your friend. They give you their personal cell phone number. You can call them anytime. You can text them anytime. Guess what? It's because they're a salesperson. That's all it is, folks. So, the EMBA has really kind of relaxed. When I say relaxed, I'm not even being, modest here. I'm talking about big time relaxed its admissions requirements over the years. So there is a chance that you could be a 40-year-old EMBA student incoming, really excited to do an EMBA in addition to, hopefully, the career that you've been working on for the past 15, 17 years, yet at the same time, don't be surprised if, and I say this with love because I've also had the other side, don't be surprised if there are 24-year-olds or even maybe 23-year-olds with really very little experience. In that sense, the younger students are definitely getting a lot more from the networking standpoint than you would be if you're someone who does have sort of, a lot more substantial experience and now you're going back to school. In this sense, you're probably going to get the short end of the stick in this sense. More quick issues to concern yourself with an executive MBA program. So if you're looking for this kind of superior caliber of academic rigor, you might be disappointed. It's not as though you're not going to get a decent education. Incredibly high caliber, you're just not going to see it because, just like an MBA, you can have students who are brand new to EMBA, but they're brand new to business. They studied psychology, for example, as an undergrad. maybe they worked for 5 years and now they're an executive MBA student in a business program. So don't be that shocked. The last thing I'm going to say is there are a good amount of EMBA programs which are somewhat disconnected from the school as a whole, especially when you're doing off campus and you're doing a Saturday only program and you barely, never even go to the actual campus itself. That part is not so much the issue, the physical aspect of it. Although the physical aspect does, play a role in it, but really your connection to the school is really the director of the EMBA program, which I'm sorry to say is really nothing more than a salesperson. And the unfortunate part is that if you were in an MBA program, you don't have that person, right? So you have actually a closer or potentially closer relationship with the, people as simple as the chair of the academic departments. And you might be thinking, really, if I'm an EMBA student, I'm not going to really have access to that. You're actually not, because EMBA programs are truly looked upon as, something separate. I'm speaking with experience, folks. I've had enough EMBA students who've told me all the wonderful things as well as all of the complaints that they've had. And, me teaching them and being inside those courses as well as inside MBA courses, so I'm really speaking from experience. So I hope this was helpful for you. Definitely reach out to me if you have any, questions or comments. If there's anything specifically I can definitely help you with, let me know. I'm pretty knowledgeable in this area. I've got a pretty good amount of experience in this area, so I can probably, really kind of help guide you a little bit more. And, once again, as always, I really truly wish you the best of luck. So send me your comments and questions, and each week you'll get a chance to win a copy of one of my books. Your choice, either my book on presentation skills or business writing skills.